Do you ever wonder what photographers really think about the latest gear, trends, and stories behind their favorite photos? Photo Breakdown takes you behind the lens and into the minds of today's top photographers, offering bite-sized episodes packed with insider insights, gear debates, and industry buzz. This is more than just photography. It's everything that makes photography tick. You're listening to Photo Breakdown. Hello, friends. I want to briefly take some time and talk about portrait lighting. And it's because I've seen people talk about the need for expensive equipment, unique equipment, specific equipment for specific needs and scenes and things like that. And I just want to break things down a little bit because you don't. In fact, there's so many professional photographers doing incredibly beautiful work with nothing, just using natural light and reflectors, V-flats, things like that. So I want to talk a little bit about portrait lighting. And when it comes to portrait photography, yes, lighting is one of the most critical elements that can make or break your photograph. The right lighting can highlight facial features, it can create mood, it can enhance the overall quality of your photographs. So understanding the various portrait lighting setups from basic to advanced can significantly elevate your skills and help you achieve fantastic, incredible, beautiful results. So let's explore different portrait lighting scenarios and setups and things like that, like natural light, right? One of the most accessible light sources. You go outside, you've got your light. Now, natural light, while outside, often is going to get you some pretty harsh light, but you can create soft light with diffusers, and going into the shade, using golden light, golden hour versus just the harsh noon time, 12 p.m. harsh sunlight, using reflectors, bouncing light instead of using direct light. There's so many different things you can do with just natural light. Let's say you're inside, right? You could also utilize natural light while inside by using windows and using curtains and things like that, right? There's a reason why so many photo studios are white, because they can have these giant windows and just utilize it as a big softbox without having to have physical light. They could just modify the natural light coming through the windows. There's also one light setups, and I'm a big fan of this, where you just have one light that is your main source of light, and then you utilize either reflectors or scrims or mix it with natural light, right? So you've got this one artificial light mixed with natural light. And that artificial light, that is your main light, could be a flash, could be an LED light, could be a tungsten light, whatever you want it to be, but it's one light, right? Now with this though, you've got to be careful. You got to be careful you don't have harsh shadows in bad spots, right? You don't want to create a raccoon eye type of look. You want to make sure that you are making it appealing on your subject's face. Or if you're doing a product, you want to make sure there's no reflections on the product that are distracting and whatnot. Sometimes when you've got glass is very complicated, cars are very complicated to light. Sometimes they are attractive depending on the look, but most of the time you want to get rid of them. So 45-degree angles, height, all these different things, modifiers, and of course, scrimming, making sure that you're blocking the light from where you don't want it to go and you're allowing it to go where you do want it to go with soft boxes and things like that. And umbrellas are great for spreading light, but they're not always great for controlling light. Utilize soft boxes when you can. Two light setups, right? So we've got natural light, we've got one light. Now there's two lights, right? So you've got your main light, your key light, and then you've got your fill light. So instead of your fill light potentially being reflectors, your fill light is, or natural light, your fill light is now an additional artificial light. So now you have two lights. Ideally, both white balance the same, right? So the temperature of these lights are the same, whether they're flash or whether they're a constant light. A lot of LEDs these days. I'm recording this in 2025. Almost every LED constant light you would buy, you can control the color temperature of the light. I will also say that if you get an RGB light, meaning one that can change to any color you want, the color accuracy is not as good if you get an LED light that can just go from warm to cool and you can control the kelvins in between. So consider that as well. Again, you're going to want to use reflectors when needed. You're going to want to use scrims and diffusers, and you're going to want to have your lights not perfectly symmetric, right? You might want one to be high and far back in a very large softbox, and another one a little closer and smaller, and different angles, right? You may not want both to be at a 45-degree angle. You might want one to be softer. You might want one to be a background light, more not a background, but like a hair light, right? A rim light to light the back of your subject, not necessarily the background itself. So lots of options with 2 lights, okay? Of course, then you can keep adding lights. You could add a 3rd light, and now you've got control over the background and your subject separate from one another. Now, for those who are doing multiple lights, especially if they're strobes, I highly recommend using one that you can control wirelessly. You don't want wires all over your set or your studio, whatever it is. So whether it's a Pro Photo, whether it's a Westcott light, whatever it might be, make sure that you got a remote that you can control it wirelessly so nobody's tripping, there's no hazard or anything like that. At the same time, if you are photographing in a studio environment, you might want to actually be tethered to a computer so that way you and your subjects can see with more detail how the photo is coming out. And if that's the case, I recommend checking out tether tools, and specifically because not only because they make the best possible tethering cables for cameras to computer, but also they are bright orange. And so in a dark studio environment, they still stand out. So again, trip hazard, you don't want black cables for somebody to trip over. 3 light setup, you've got your main light, you've got your fill light, then you've got your additional light, which could be a rim light, it could be a background light, it could be anything. It could be an RGB light that is quote unquote gelled, but without the gel because it's RGB. Or you could just use a light that is gelled to add some color to your scene. And if you're going to add color, don't overdo it. Don't overdo it. So with the 3 light setup, you're going to start with the 2 lights. You're going to get those positioned, and then you're going to take that 3rd light that you want to add that extra flavor with, whether it's the background or something else. And that's when you're going to fill that in. Again, that's going to be probably fill light level or even less potentially, just for that additional subtle effect or dimensions or things like that. Now, there's also things like high key and low key, right? High key being like super bright lights. These are typically where the background is just white, right? They're very bright. Minimal shadows are used. They're, think of it like a commercial where it's, I don't know, milk on a white background, right? That's the best way to explain it. Very high key, very bright, and no dark tones. Versus low key, which is very dark and moody. Lots of shadows, a lot of moody atmosphere to it, strong contrast, and almost new film noir style, right? That is low key, right? Both have their place, both are fantastic, both are beautiful. It's just a matter of what you're actually going for is what you should aim for with the lighting style that you're doing. And it is worth noting that if you're really good with lights and you really understand photography theory and how to utilize the light and things like that, you can actually create a low-key look even in bright light. So lots of fun with lighting. Now, I mentioned rim lighting before. I just want to talk briefly about what that is. Rim lighting is basically where you've got a light in the back of your subject aimed towards the back of your subject's head or body or whatever to create this sort of light halo around your subject. And what that does is it actually will separate your background, your subject, from the background in your photo to give your photo more depth, even if your subject is not physically further than the backdrop without the rim light, right? A rim light is similar to a hair light, except a hair light is focused on the head. Rim light is focused on the full subject overall. There's also a beauty dish. A beauty dish is a type of reflector that you would attach it to your light, and the light goes through this dish, bounces off a plate, then reflects off the plate back to the dish and then to the subject. It's this small reflector. Typically, there may be like 20 to 30 inches in size, in diameter for the circle, but it creates this very high contrast light on your subject. And it's very flattering for headshots and things like that, that you want that pop from your subject. I don't recommend it on every single thing, but there you go. So that's just a quick overview of lighting. You got to start with the basics. Start with natural light. Bring in the reflectors. Bring in one artificial light. Work with one artificial light and natural light. Then bring in a second light. You balance the key light with the fill light and then your natural light as a third fill light. Then bring in a third light. And now you've got your key light, your fill light, your sort of ambiance light, which could be a hair light, could be a rim light, could be a color, whatever it might be. Hell, your rim light or your hair light could be a color itself. And then when you start doing this, you could keep adding more light if you have lights on hand. And then experiment with high key, experiment with low key, experiment with different types of lighting setups and lights themselves. Experiment with modifiers. Don't just dive into what everybody tells you to get just because they're telling you to get it. Start at the beginning. It's so important. Mastering portrait lighting setups is an essential skill for photographers, portrait photographers, that is. Wedding photographers need to focus on lighting as well, right? You may not think it, but you do. By starting with the basics and gradually incorporating more advanced techniques, you can create stunning portraits that capture the essence of your subjects. Just remember to experiment, play around. There is nothing wrong. Just don't experiment when you're being paid to experiment. Experiment on your own time. Have fun with light, because that's what photography is all about. And with practice, you'll develop an instinct for lighting and what to do when you are on the job and paid for getting the job done. So thanks for tuning in to another episode of Photo Breakdowns. Till next time.